Welcome to our Economics HL presentation about market failure in Taiwan. We'll be talking about housing. Our group members include Wu Tse Han, Shun Nakahara, and Gabriel Wu. The work division is divided into three parts. Shun Nakahara will be defining the different types of market failure. Wu Tse Han will be defining housing issues in Taipei and why this is a market failure. While Gabriel Wu, me, will be talking about the possible solutions and current steps taken by the government to solve this market failure. Part 1 by Shun Nakahara, talking about the different types of market failure.
So, hello, my name is Shun Nakahara, and to begin with our presentation, I'm going to introduce the concept of market failure and provide a clear image as to why it is an interesting topic. So, the market failure occurs when the free market either overproduce or underproduce a certain good. So, both overproduction and underproduction of the goods are in tight relationship with producer's desire of making profit. That is, the producer of the goods are only interested in making their own benefit rather than thinking what is the best for the society as a whole. For the example of market failure, it can be under-provision of public goods and merit goods. The reason why this under-provision occurs is because there is little to no profit that the producer can make from a certain type of good or service. For instance, there will be relatively less provision of education in developing countries as education is considered a merit good and it does not directly lead to a profit gain for the government. So next, I will be specifically talking about types of market failure. So common in all kinds of market failure, they all cause a spillover effect, externality, either positive or negative one, on the society. It occurs either during the consumption or production of the goods. First, I'm going to introduce the externalities in production. The production of the tree by the tree farmers often has a positive externality to the society. That is, through the production of the trees, there will be a spillover benefit to the society. Those spillover benefits in this tree production can be considered increased rate of photosynthesis, which reduces the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, or the prevention of the soil erosion. Although the positive externalities in producing trees can be immense, there are also some negative externality in producing some goods. That is, the production of certain goods can cause a harm or negative impact on the whole society. For instance, the production of the phone can involve some of the mining that causes the society to be worse off. The crucial component of phone, which is mined, named tantalum, is being mined at the east coast of Democratic Republic of Congo. This mining involves the logging of the forest, which reduces the habitat of gorilla living there. In this case, the harm to the society can be identified as the habitat loss of gorilla, and it will take a lot of time and effort to replant the trees for those gorillas. So, next, I'm going to examine the positive externality of production. I'm going to examine the externality in production. First, I'm going to introduce you the positive externality of production in terms of graph. So, here the graph indicates the positive externality of production of producing merit goods. As you can see, the free market is now producing Q1 amount of merit goods. This is indicated by the point where the MPC curve and MSB curve meets. The amount of Q1 being produced indicates a market failure since the socially optimal production of the goods is at Q dot, where the MSC and MSB intersects. As a result, there will be a market failure in this under-provision of the merit goods. If the government could intervene to shift the MPC curve towards the MSB curve, where the socially optimal output is achieved, there will be a welfare gain to the whole society, and thus the market failure will be eliminated. Next, I'm going to introduce you the negative externality of production in terms of graph. Here, it illustrates the market failure by overproduction of merit goods. Now, the free market is producing QP quantity, which is indicated by the point where MPC and MSB curve intersects. and this amount of goods being produced is far more than the socially optimal level of output, QS, which is indicated by the points where the MSC curve and SB curve intersect. In other words, too much goods are being produced at a low price. Hence, this links back to the concept of market failure, where the demerit goods are often being overprovided by the free market. Here, the consequence of market failure is being illustrated by the triangle here. Since the socially optimal production is at quantity QS, any overproduction beyond that point will be considered a market failure. Hence, the quantity being produced between QP and QS amount are all considered to have a negative externality to the society. So next, I'm going to introduce you the externality in consumption. First, the concept of positive externality of production can be the library use, for example. The use of library by the people can have a positive externality since it will bring a spillover benefit to the society as a whole. Since the people can become more knowledgeable after reading books in library, it contributes more to the country. So, on the other hand, there is also a negative externality in consumption, such as the consumption of MDMA. At the first glance, the consumption of this good can be seen as a personal affair. But, however, in fact, the effect of consuming this drug are often externalized. In other words, it will bring a negative impact on the society. The people after consuming this type of goods will often go berserk, since these drugs are capable of bringing ecstasy to the subject. Therefore, the consumption of these goods attributes to the increase in crime rate within the city. So next, I'm going to analyze the negative externality of consumption in terms of graph. So as you can see, the free market is now producing Q amount of goods which are all consumed by the consumers. With the Q amount of goods being provided, it links back to the concept of market failure, where the goods are being overproduced in order to fulfill the existing demand. As indicated in the graph, the socially optimal level of production should be at a quantity of Q1, where the MSB and MSC curve intersects. But the free market is actually producing the amount of Q, which is indicated by the points where MPB and MSB curve intersects. Hence, it illustrates the situation of market failure, where the producers are only interested in making profit and is careless about the negative impact that can be brought by the consumption of the goods. The welfare less is illustrated by the triangle in the graph. So since the socially optimal amount of consumption of the goods is at Q1 quantity, any consumption beyond that will result in a welfare loss. Hence, the quantity being produced between Q and Q1 amount are all considered to have a negative externality to the society. So lastly, I'm going to end my part with the analysis on positive externality. First of all, the free market is producing goods at an amount of Q, which is indicated by the point where MPB curve and MSC curve intersect. However, this amount of being produced and hence being consumed indicates the situation of market failure. The socially efficient amount of production is at Q1, which is more than the Q amount being provided by the free market. Therefore, it links back to the concept of market failure, where the goods are being underprovided and hence being underconsumed. To eliminate this market failure illustrated by the triangle in the graph, the government can choose to shift MPB curve towards MSB curve in order to collect the possible welfare gain.
So next, my name is Han, and today I will be presenting the second part of our presentation, which is about defining housing issue in Taipei specifically and why it is a market failure. So before defining our market failure, I will first introduce what kind of market failure about the housing issue in Taipei. So the market failure here in Taipei is the positive externality of consumption, which I will be presenting later on. But before talking about the positive externality of consumption, I will be first presenting the issue about housing, the root cause about housing issue in Taiwan. So the cause one will be too many domestic and foreign investors. So Taiwan, specifically Taipei, as a city where lots of houses and buildings were being built, and there are lots of investors wanting to buy houses in Taiwan. However, the purpose for them to buy houses was to gain more profit or more revenue, right? So their purpose will not be living in the houses, which is contributing to the high vacancy rate existing in the city of Taipei. So one of the causes will be too many investors. Since they buy houses, they have the money, so they will push the price, the housing price in Taipei, they will increase the price, and they are not actually living in a house, so it increases the vacancy rate. So the people actually working in Taipei or even Taiwan wouldn't have the amount of money to buy the houses, since it is too expensive, and only the high house prices were only left for the foreign investor. So it is one of the root cause of the housing issue in Taiwan. The second cause will be low taxes. So as previously mentioned, there are too many investors investing in housing in Taiwan, but the Taiwanese government aren't actually responding to the overwhelming amount of the foreign and domestic investor. Although the Taiwanese government had imposed taxes toward investors when they invest houses, but it's not actually effective, since when the Taiwanese government implements such law during 2015, the house price did not significantly drop, but instead it increases over time. So in response, we can see that low taxes implemented by the government is not an effective measure, and along with the overwhelming amount of the foreign investor will cause the housing issue even more severe in Taipei. And the third cause of the housing issue in Taiwan will be the limited amount of land. So Taiwan is actually an island, especially like in Taipei, and the amount of land are limited, so meaning that the amount of house will be limited as well. However, as previously mentioned, the high vacancy rate are caused by too many domestic and foreign investors, in which when there's high vacancy rate, the house aren't actually supplying to the people who's in need. However, they're just leaving vacant over there. But with the consideration of limited amount of land, there will be fixed amount of house and fixed amount of adequate shelter for people to live in, which means that actually housing in Taipei will be even more scarce. The price of housing will keep rising. So it is also contributing back to the housing issue in Taiwan. And the fourth cause will be the government's slow pace. So it actually connects back to the second cause I've previously mentioned about low taxes. Since low taxes is just one out of lots of measures that the government could have taken apart on diminishing and reducing the house prices in Taiwan. So one of the cause would be government slow pace, as the government are not efficiently revising relative laws related to housing, and also they aren't really actively opposing the investor, which is the root cause of high house price in Taiwan. And the fifth cause is the increase in population. So as time went on, the population living in Taipei will be rising, so meaning that there will be much more demand for housing. However, when there are more houses being built, there's lots of like around 30% of high vacancy rate. However, the high vacancy rate will be a problem, since the house were just built and they're leaving a vacant. But for people who is in need, they do not actually have the money to buy the houses. So while there's more people, there's less houses for the people to buy and to live in. So it is creating the housing issue in Taipei or Taiwan, which is causing high prices, and which is what governments should be solving. Next, I will be defining the market failure. So as I previously mentioned, it is a positive externality of consumption, and I will be discussing why buying houses will create additional spillover benefit to the third party. But first, I will be clarifying one point, which is shown on the left side of the slide. So first, we are assuming that, and in fact it is a fact, that Taipei has high vacancy rate, meaning that although houses are being supplied in the city, the high vacancy rate should not be calculated, since they're just left vacant by the investors, and they are not actually supplying to the people working in Taipei who's in need. So although there are more buildings being built in Taipei, it is the fact that high vacancy rate wouldn't count as a housing issue. in Taipei. Yes, and sorry for the interruption. And then I will be describing a diagram and why the housing issue is a market failure. So first, buying houses is beneficial for the citizens. Why? I'll give in 2 examples. And the first example will be workers can rest, right? So after buying the houses, workers will have a shelter. They can rest in that shelter, and this is actually a positive spillover effect to the society, because if the workers do not have the opportunity to rest, then they cannot work, right? And resting allow workers to be energetic to work for next day. So it is actually benefit the third party, which is the society, since when workers are working, it contributes to the country's economy, which is making the country even better. The second effect on making the buying houses the positive externality of consumption would be the construction industry in Taiwan. So as I mentioned, there are lots of houses being built in Taipei, and although there are high vacancy rate, but while ignoring the fact of the high vacancy rate, we can still confirm the fact that the construction industry in Taiwan are flourishing, since there are more houses being built in Taiwan, and it actually contributes not only to the construction industry itself, but also contributes to, for example, the money floor or the employee or the workshop provided by the industry. So it is actually contributing back to the economy, contributing back to society, which, for example, allowing workers to work and allowing workers to build houses will lower the unemployment rate of the country. So it is in fact benefiting the country. And back to our chart, I will be explaining about the positive externality of consumption. So first, due to the fact that I will using diagram to discuss the positive externality of consumption. And due to the fact that we are discussing about consumption, which is something about the social benefit and private benefit, we'll be assuming that the supply curve, which is representing the marginal social cost, will not shift and will not change. And first, we will have a line which is marginal private cost. As we can see over here, there is a marginal private cost, which marginal private benefit, which which it is the benefit enjoyed by the house owner. So marginal private benefit is the benefit enjoyed by themselves, and upward there is a marginal social benefit, which is the benefit enjoyed by the society. And marginal social benefit is higher than the marginal private benefit due to the fact that the society is getting better off by having more people buying the houses, since they can rest and they can be energetic to work for their work. However, as we can see, we have a triangle ABC over here, which is the welfare loss. So there are actually 2 crucial points considering inside this triangle. The first one is point A, at which it is at price P and Q, quantity at Q. So it is the market equilibrium, since it is an intersection between the marginal social cost and the marginal private benefit. And up here we can see point B, which have higher price than P as the equilibrium point, and more quantity as Q, which is at Q1. And this is actually the social optimal point, which is the intersection between the marginal social cost and the marginal social benefit, which it is a socially optimal point. And here we can see the triangle, which is the potential welfare gain or welfare loss by the society, since it should be already gained by the society. So the society are being better off. And under this triangle, we can see that the marginal social benefit is actually greater than the marginal social cost. So it is another explanation explaining why the society is getting better off when people are buying more houses. And next we will be leading into part 3.
Hi, my name is Gabriel Wu, and as Curtis has outlined in the problem section, the housing crisis in Taiwan, and Taipei specifically, is really important. So I'll be talking about the current government interventions in place, talk about the effectiveness and potential solutions for this market failure. First of all, I want to talk about what has the government done so far, some policies that the government has implemented. First of all, in 2018, the Ministry of Interiors, Construction and Planning approved of 71,963 rental subsidies ranging anywhere from 32 to 500 NT dollars a month. That although barely covers 10 to 30% of the rents, is also really important in showing government intervention and policies working in homeowners and home renters' favor. Another way the government is helping to solve the housing crisis in Taiwan so far is lowering interest rates. Interest rates at 1.38 has been the lowest since 2009 after the financial crash. So having this lower interest rates encourages homeowners to take out mortgages and to buy houses. This hopefully should decrease the housing issue. However, we'll be talking about the effectiveness later. Increased property development is also another major policy the government has been pushing for. A few statistics we could see is in 2019, Taipei has a total of more than 500 new units being built, which is a 67% increase from last year, the same period last year. So new housing units are being built at fast rates. And in order to keep up to the demand and to make sure that this myriad good of housing is not undersupplied. So I want to talk about how effective these major government policies are. Government granted subsidies and increasing housing development has been highly effective at combating the issue of housing. These two policies has helped a lot of people getting affordable housing. Obviously, almost 72,000 houses received rental subsidies, and upwards of 50,000 units were constructed in the first half of 2019. So these two government policies are really effective at combating the housing issue. However, the home ownership rate in Taiwan is really high, being always at the high and mid 80 percentile. So after the 2008 crash, the lowering the interest rates does not actually really help with the housing issue. Now I'd like to talk about some potential solutions. I'll be talking about 3 potential solutions that the governments could take to help solve this housing issue even more. So the first one is to give out more subsidies. Although governments do a little bit of subsidizing in terms of rent, the amount provided is extremely little. 35 to 50 is only covering around 10 to 30% of an average month's rent. So by increasing the subsidy amount and increasing the subsidies granted, governments may provide more housing units at an affordable rate to the masses, which obviously has great spillover benefits because this is a positive externalities of consumption. The graph right here shows how the subsidies will help with the housing issue, especially when we take, so S right here is S right here shows the supply curve of housing units before subsidies being granted. Well, the S2 curve right here shows how housing prices after subsidies are being granted. The equilibrium price decreases, which means the prices that the homeowners or the home consumers need to pay is becoming less. That way, this is beneficial for the economy because it has spillover benefits towards third parties and to society as a whole. Thus, by governments providing subsidies to housing becomes a lot more affordable, and thus the market failure of the undersupply of this myriad good becomes less seen. I'll now talk about a second potential solution, which is government housing projects and encouraging real estate trust funds. So similar to some countries such as Singapore, which have government granted housing units, Taiwan could also take note of this. One major problem that governments may face is the lack of public funding and expensive subsidies. This may be solved through government providing and encouraging investment in real estate trust funds, where governments or other entities issue these funds and invest into real estate with these funds. The return on investment and the rent collected will then be redistributed as a form of dividends. This policy could go in line with the government's housing projects similar to Singapore, where governments build housing condos and rents it out. First, the trust fund and the government may acquire the money to build more condos and provide housing, thus providing real estate trust funds to investors with a great ROI. In addition to this, also having the spillover benefits of the consumptions of real estate, having a positive benefit on society. So this is the second potential solution, is to have government provided housing projects funded by real estate trust funds, which individual investors may invest in. For the third solution, I want to talk about a vacancy tax. So vacancy is really an ironic issue when it comes to housing crisis. because 35,000 housing units are vacant for more than a year in just Taipei. This is largely due to investment properties and investors hoping to gain equity and hoping to gain appreciation from the lucrative Taipei real estate market. These investment properties decrease the supply of housing. They withhold these properties, causing a shortage in housing. Thus, it is important for the government to ensure that investment-graded properties are not vacant, because it takes potential properties out of circulation. A great way to do this is, of course, the vacancy tax. A vacancy tax could be seen as a tax on the deadweight properties of a market. A vacancy tax will decrease the vacant properties, and thus having more properties in circulation will increase the supply of housing. So vacancy tax could be seen as in addition tax to a property tax, which incentivizes property owners with vacant houses to list their properties out for sale or at least for rent. By adding a vacancy tax, the full potential of the housing market may be met. So this also decreases the debt weight and moves the equilibrium closer to the social equilibrium, price and quantity supplied, and the useless properties on the markets may be got rid of because of this vacancy tax, causing more supplies for the consumers and thus solving the market failure of the undersupply of merit goods, in this case housing. So these are the three solutions, or potential solutions, that Taipei and the Taiwan government may have used. Here are our work cited, and we think this is our Economics HL presentation about market failure. We thank you for listening and spending time with us.